Hello guys, this is Jarish. Welcome to Rica's Cloud. In this video, I am going to explain Linux, Apache, Mysql, PHP, which is LAMP stack with EC2 and Amazon RDS. I'm just going to follow the Amazon's tutorial. I have already explained some basics related to Amazon RDS. So in this video, I'm just going to directly configure a RDS Mysql DB instance in private subnet. So I'll go to RDS. I'll click on databases. As of now, I don't have any database instance. I'll click on create database. I'll go with standard create, which has more options. I'll choose MySQL as the DB engine. I'll go with free tier. I'll choose the database name as demo RDS MySQL. And for the master database username, I'll go with the default name admin, and I'll set up a password for that user. This username and password is later used to connect to the DB instance from MySQL client or using the website codes. Because I chose free tier in the previous step, I was allowed to go with T2 micro instance. I'll go with the default storage. Because we are going with free tier, we can't configure multi-AZ deployment. Just to match with this architectural drawing, I create this DB instance on the custom VPC. I'll choose custom VPC. Even though this drawing shows that this DB instance is on private 1 subnet, we can't create subnet directly. We need to create something called Subnet Group. We can use the default subnet group if you have already created, but when you are creating for the first time, you will be asked to create a subnet group. And this DB is not going to be accessed over the internet. I just want to show you connecting from the web server, which I am going to launch in the public subnet. Which means this DB instance is going to be connected only from within the VPC. So I'm not enabling public access. And for this DB as well, we need a security group, like I said earlier. So we need to select an existing security group, or we need to create a new security group. The security group which we are mapping to this RDS instance should have MySQL port number allowed. Now because I mapped this AWS class Mumbai-SG security group, I'll go to the security group section in EC2 management console. I'll choose this security group, and as of now, inbound rule doesn't have MySQL allowed, so I'll add a rule for Mysql, which is 3306. And instead of allowing from anywhere, you can allow from the security group which you are going to map with the EC2 instance. I'm going to use the same security group for the EC2 instance which I am going to launch. So I'll choose the security group name as the source. The instances which are mapped to this security group can able to connect to the DB instance. Because it is not a multi-AZ deployment, it is asking to choose the availability zone where this RDS instance has to be deployed. I'll go with AP South 1 A just to match with this architectural drawing. In additional configuration, we can able to see the database default port number, and we are just going to use the password authentication. If we connect from this instance either by typing MySQL commands, or if we use some programs to connect, that is going to use the username and password which we created in the previous steps. Now in additional configuration, because when I am going to follow this tutorial's program code is going to connect to a database called sample. So I'm creating a initial database with the name called sample. You can give any name for the database, depends upon how you are inserting the information within the database. I'll go with the default parameter group and option group, and I'm not changing the backup settings, the logs or the maintenance for this database. I'll click on create database to create the database. It is going to take few minutes for this MySQL DB instance to become available. Only after the DB instance is available, we will be able to get the endpoint of this database. As of now, if we click on view credential details, we will be able to see the master username and the password which we used at the time of creating the database. Because this database is going to take some time, meantime, I'm going to launch a EC2 Linux instance. I'll go to EC2 Management Console. I don't have any EC2 instances as of now in this Mumbai region. I'll click on Launch Instances. I'll go with free tier only. I'll choose Amazon Linux. I'll go with T2 Micro. I'll choose Custom VPC. Because my DB instance is also there in the Custom VPC, I'm choosing Custom VPC for this EC2 instance. And I'm placing this EC2 instance on public subnet, which I created on AP South 1A. Because this instance has to be connected over the internet, make sure you have auto assign public IP address enabled. I'll go with the default storage. I'll go next. I'll give the name tag as web server. We are going to make this Linux instance act as a web server. Then I'll go next. I'll choose an existing security group, the same security group which I mapped for the RDS DB instance. It's not mandatory to use the same security group. If you want, you can use a different security group for the web server instance and different security group for the database instance. But I'll go with the same security group. I'll click on review and launch, and launch. I have this key pair in my local computer, so I acknowledge and I'll launch the instance. Now this EC2 Linux instance is also getting ready. The instance state is pending, it will turn to running, and the status check needs to come to 2/2. Still, the DB instance is also in the creating state. I have waited for a few minutes. After a few minutes, you can see the database instance status becomes available. Similarly, the EC2 instance status check also comes to 2/2. Now if I go to RDS and if I click on view connection details, we can able to see the endpoint. Now we have the RDS Mysql instance and we have a Linux instance. Now I'll connect to this Linux instance and I'm going to configure Apache with PHP. This PHP code is going to connect to the database sample which we used at the time of creating the database. Now I'll connect to this EC2 instance via EC2 instance connect. I'll log in as EC2 user. Once after logging in, if you want, you can follow this tutorial link. Click on this create a web server tab, and if you scroll down, here you have the instructions what you need to type within the Linux instance. We have already launched an instance and now we are going to install Apache web server with the PHP code following this article. I have connected to the EC2 instance. Now I will update the softwares. I'll copy this command and I'll paste it here. Once the software is updated, now I'll install softwares related to database and PHP. You copy this command and I'll paste it here. This is going to install database client and PHP related packages within this Linux instance. Just after installing this software, we will be able to connect from this Linux command line to this DB instance by using command. I'll use Mysql -u the username admin -h the host which I need to connect is this endpoint. I'll copy from here and I'll paste it, and then I'll ask to prompt for the password, and if I hit enter, it will ask for the password. The password to connect to this DB instance is icascloud 2022. I'll type that, and now I'm within the RDS Mysql DB instance. And if I look for show databases, at the time of creating the database, we created a sample database. That database we can able to see here. And if I go within the database and if I look for tables, as of now there is no tables. Now I'll come out from this database and I'll continue configuring the Apache web server. I'll use yum install httpd to install Apache within this Linux instance. I'll start the service by using this command systemctl start httpd. Starting the service will start at the runtime. If you want to start even if the server is rebooted, you need to enable it by using this command systemctl enable httpd. At this point, we will be able to access the website which we configured within this Linux instance. We will be getting a default page from this Linux instance. If I get the public IP address of this instance or the public DNS name, and if I try accessing the website, I will be able to get the test page. Because this Apache web server doesn't have any PHP code to connect to this DB instance, we are just getting the test page. Now, following the tutorial, I'm going to place the PHP related programs within the Apache default home directory. For that, it is asked to give the EC2 user permission by adding to Apache group. Then to refresh, you need to log out and log in back. Then EC2 user will be part of Apache group. You can verify that by using this groups command. Then you need to change the ownership and group ownership for all the files and directories within this /var www directory. And you need to change the permission for the folder /var www and all the subdirectories with this permission. I'll copy this command and I'll paste it here. And for files, the permission should be 664. Once after doing all this permission related configuration, now we'll use the commands for our Apache web server to connect to the DB instance. I'll go to /var www directory and I'll create a directory called inc and I'll go within the directory called inc and I'll create a file called dbinfo.inc. You can use any name of your choice, but this name is the one which is used in the PHP code later. Now within this file, we need to use these variables like the DB server endpoint, the username, the password, and the database to connect. I'll copy this code and I'll paste it here, and I'll change the DB endpoint to our DB instance endpoint, and I'll change the username as admin. I'll change the password to Vikas Cloud 2022. We use the endpoint, username and password, whatever we gave at the time of creating the DB and whatever we got for this endpoint. And the database name is still sample, and I'll save this file. Once after this file is created, now we need to go to the directory /var www.html, and within this directory you can create your PHP file. I'll go with the name index.php, and within it I'll copy the code which is there in this article. This code has the configuration to read the details related to which database it needs to connect, the endpoint, the username, password and the database. And also it has the code to display the name and address of the employees. It's going to create a table within the database called sample. So I'll copy this code, I'll paste it in the file index.php, and I'll save this. Earlier when we tried accessing this website, we just got the test page. But now if I again refresh this page, because we placed the PHP code within this Linux instance, that page will be displayed, and that is also going to connect to this sample database. It shows that the page is sample database, and it is asking like a form where we can give some entries. The entries which we give here is going to be added to the sample database. I'll just give the name as Jarish India, and I'll click on add database. I did that via the browser, but it might have got added to the SQL database. Now if you want to directly verify that, you can use the Mysql command, and again you can log into the DB instance. Earlier when we looked for tables, we didn't saw any tables, but now there will be a table called employees. And if you query this table, you will be able to see the entry. Now we have successfully made this LAMP stack configuration following the AWS tutorial. In my next video, I am going to explain you about multi-AZ deployment and RAID replica.